Today I'm making Korean style dumplings, or as I like to call it, Mandu. But the kicker is, these aren't your regular Mandus. These Mandus are actually North Korean. On a side note, Mandus is my way of saying Mandu in its plural Konglish form, so if anyone was confused, that's my explanation. Anyways, what differentiates the North Korean style Mandus from the regular Mandus are these starch noodles, or Dangmyun. This will be part of your filling, but for now, let's put this aside and get into the recipe. Onto a mesh strainer, place one chunk of tofu, then on top of the tofu, place something heavy. I used a clean pot filled with water. The goal is to get as much water out of your tofu. While the tofu is doing its thing, we need to prepare our vegetables. I'm going to do this at my sink because I need to wash a large amount of Chinese chives. Chinese chives taste like chives, but they're much taller and more robust. I guess instead of it being more of a herb, it's more vegetable-y, if that makes sense. Anyways, let these soak for like 10 minutes. As the chives are soaking, I'm going to cook the starch noodles in a simple soy sauce marinade. To a pan, add enough water to cover the noodle. Then add a little under half a cup of soy sauce. To that, add your noodles into this soy sauce water mixture. As your noodles are cooking, remember to stir your noodles to prevent them from sticking to one another. After that, add 1 tablespoon of sugar. Let the noodles cook according to the package instructions. In my case, it was 10 minutes. Remove the squashed tofu and put it into a big mixing bowl. Then to the strainer, drain your starch noodles and let them cool off. Season your tofu with salt. The tofu is part of the filling, which needs to be seasoned before going into the mandu. Speaking of filling, we need to prep the main component of the filling, the meat. Usually, North Korean mandu has a 1-to-1 ratio of ground pork and ground beef. In this case, I'm using a pound of ground pork and a pound of ground beef. I'm using a pretty lean ground beef, but the filling won't be dry due to the ground pork. Open the containers of ground pork and beef and place them onto the paper towels. Pat the ground meat till they're very dry. Salt both meats. I could just add a bunch of salt at once at the end, but salting each ingredient of the filling gives me a better idea of how much salt I actually need. Add freshly cracked pepper. Remember to add enough to season both sides of the meat. Add a good amount of garlic powder. This will help get rid of some unwanted porkiness. Finally, add some cayenne pepper. Usually you would use Korean pepper flakes, but cayenne is cheaper and gives a similar kick of spice. Now let's return to our abandoned chives. To prepare Chinese chives, you need to detach the old or rotten part of the chives. These can be found on the very end of chives. A simple tug will detach the rotten portion, and this helps you avoid stringy pieces of chives in your final product. The water is pretty murky, so I'm going to give the chives another wash. To a strainer, place your washed chives so they can dry. Like the tofu, we're trying to eliminate as much moisture for our filling. While your chives are drying, we need to chop our starch noodles. The starch noodles should be around half an inch to a centimeter in length. It is much easier to chop the noodles when it's hot, but at the same time, I don't really want to touch something that's hot. Also, the more knives, the better. Once chopped, move the starch noodles to the mixing bowl with the tofu. I forgot to add this part, but season the pork with ground ginger. Add the seasoned meat into the mixing bowl and then mix. You want to break the tofu completely down and get a homogeneous mixture. Add some minced garlic to the mixture. Mix the mixture one more time thoroughly and make sure all the ingredients are mixed with one another. Now it's time to chop the chives. As you can see, I have an ungodly amount of chives. It may look like a lot, but it's the perfect amount for the amount of meat we have. I found the best way to cut a large amount of chives is to stand them up and line up the ends. From there, you just start cutting from the root ends. I'm going to split my filling into two bowls because I need to add all of the chopped chives. Add the chopped chives to the mixing bowl. Season the chives with pepper and salt. If we didn't season each ingredient each step of the way, you can probably see why it would be hard to know how much salt and pepper you actually need for this mixture to be fully seasoned. Once seasoned, mix the filling. I forgot to add the sesame oil. We want to add around 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. Once added, mix the filling again. This is the final time, I promise. Get some mandu skins, bowl of water that we will use to glue the mandu shut, a tray with flour to place and prevent the mandu from sticking to one another. Now we can make some mandu. Ignore my hands as I'm a mere amateur and focus on the hands coming from the green shirt. First, grab a spoonful of the filling and place it onto the mandu skin. After that, dab the edges of the mandu with water. This will allow the ends to glue shut. The goal from here is to push the filling to the center of the mandu skin. If there's filling on the water-wetted portion of the mandu skin or the exterior regions of the mandu skin, it prevents the mandu from being completely sealed. This can lead to the mandu exploding while cooking. Once sealed, pinch the outer portions of the mandu. This will provide further protection from your mandus exploding. On a side note, this dish is perfect for meal prep. You can prepare a ton of filling easily and it's fairly inexpensive. These dumplings can be frozen and stored for months. When you're ready to eat, they can be steamed, boiled, or even fried. It's a very versatile dish. Today I'm going to cook my mandus by steaming them. Fill up the pot with boiling water. I don't have one of those steaming bamboo baskets, but I do have a metal one. I also have this cloth that I use. This allows me to pull the mandus out of the basket fairly easily. Place the mandus and try not to overcrowd the basket. The mandus should not be right next to each other or else they could stick to one another. I got around 8 mandus in my basket. Place the steaming basket on top of your pot and let them steam for 8 minutes. While the mandus are steaming, let's make our dipping sauce. Add equal parts of soy sauce, vinegar, and mirin. Add some Korean pepper flakes for some raw spice. Finally, add some crushed sesame seeds. Once the 8 minutes are up, remove the dumplings and separate them immediately to prevent them from sticking to one another.